So this 1 hour, these are real client voices, our clients. So some of the photos are real photos, some of them are stock photos, but the quotes are real. What we hope that you get out of this 1 hour is sharpen your view on how to select and work with the ideas and extract the essence of what could be done in terms of innovation with the customers that you work with, how to get new customer insights, and further down the innovation journey, how to transition an idea to scaling up, and then last but not least, how to align with core to take it to scale, to de-risk and accelerate the journey. So just 1 or 2 slides showing some background information, why we need to care for that topic, and then diving into the topic real fast. So scaling innovation or creating new businesses in the corporate context, that is still mandatory. So if you look at the stats tell you that the average lifespan of companies is still falling. Right, so there's a need to rejuvenate the company, and it's not about the ambition. Every other European company, 55% to be precise, you see the sources, McKinsey, Bain strategy of the figures that I present. So 55% of the European companies say scaling innovation, building new business is a top 3 priority. But the problem is that the reality is really dire. It's a sad story that we have to tell if you look at the stats. So only 1 out of 8, roughly 10 to 15% of these ambitions to scale innovation, to create new businesses, make it to a market launch. And if you then look how big do these new companies, new business lines become, you find that only 22% make it beyond a 50 million euro business. So if you add these together, 10 to 15% to the launch times 22% to cross the 50 million threshold, the message is, if you launch a corporate startup today, or if you acquire an external greenfield startup with the ambition to make it big, to support corporate transformation, well, your chance to win is 3%. So we want to beat the odds. And those 20 companies that originally co-created the Lean Scaleup, in the meantime, some 40 or 50, who have adopted it in various degrees, they will tell you, well, you need to have 6 pieces, 6 must-haves. 5 of them are centered around one central issues, if you want to beat the odds. That's not the excellence. If you dive deeper, and this is what the co-creation work that we're currently doing will show you, there are 12 modules that make up the infrastructure. If your ambition is to become excellent in building new businesses. But these are the 6 must-have. It all starts with a problem that is worth to be solved. Some call it a burning hair problem in here, right? Where customers say, I need to solve that problem, and I'm even willing to pay. Wow, what a concept. I'm willing to pay for getting these problems solved. And actually, Jan and Beat will show you in a minute how we can feel the temperature, right, to remain in that image, to measure the pain points, which is the start of the journey. Well, if you go on, then you'll find a couple more must-haves, like the C-suite ambition for the new and the clarity, what kind of new should be built, the alignment of the now and the new. And in practice, you'll find that the so-called PM systems, portfolio management, performance management, product management, process management, all those P&Ms are a crucial linchpin between the now and the new, and essential success factor to make it happen. You need to have a team with the defined autonomy in the corporate context. I like to call it a startup peers kind of startup autonomy in here. And you need to have the right mindset. But all in all, and above all, and that's the topic for today, you need to have an end-to-end process which systematically cuts down the uncertainty and the risk. because the core organization doesn't like risks, right? So we as an innovator, as a blue shirt, we're looking for the blue oceans. We need to design that process in a way that it is compatible with the red shirts kind of management system. And this end-to-end process, as you'll see, this will be the launch pad, Beat, for then diving deeper into. We go step by step. We'll have 4 major phases. Question number 1, where should we search for those ideas that could become a new business? Number 2, what are the meaningful ideas for that given company in that given situation that we should take to validate and build the product in the next step, and after that scale it to become a meaningful business. So Beat, let's dive in and let's start with the start, yes. Isn't it, right?
I will focus now, or we will focus now on the first 2 steps, the search field and the meaningful ideas. Very often when we start working with companies, they come to us with what we call a search field. The search field can be, it's also called innovation space. It's called a direction we want to go. And it's very often driven by certain sources, for certain drivers. It can be the business strategy that says, hey, we have to go, for example, into sustainability. The stock exchange asks for this. We have to do more in sustainability, as an example. Or there is sometimes some, we call it pet projects. There is this, hey, we have a vision, we want to do this, and then the whole organization works on this. Often we see tech push, a new technology. I mean, we just come out of the phase of digitalization. Many companies are still in there. Let's digitalize. Okay, so let's digitalize. And then they start to digitalize. It's a search field, etc. Often also there is a discussion between an innovation lab that the company has, an internal incubator, and the core business, and there are discussions going on, and okay, let's search in this area. These search fields are then kind of vaguely defined. There are some filters, some criteria, which search fields should be prioritized, and in the end, they are set as the agenda, they are agreed, and then companies jump to idea generation and to solution. And Jan will show what happens then.
Yeah, so this is typically what we see. So we have mentioned this. It can be buzzwords that define a search field, and that is all good and fine, but it's just a fuzzy search field, like, I don't know, Internet of Things, sustainability is one of huge words. And what we see happening is that companies start to create an ocean of ideas, or what we call an ocean of ideas. And that is, they go into the solution mode, right? They start to develop solution because that is what in the end they also want to deliver, and they jump a couple of steps. Instead of doing this in the abstract, let's jump into the case and show at hand how that actually developed, following this maybe less drowning in an ocean of ideas approach. So the case we will take you through is about mobility. So you have to imagine we're based in Switzerland. There is basically one big rail company and the national rail company, and they also have a lot of push to do innovation and develop their trains and services and other things. Some of the search fields you see here. So there was kind of an innovation lab, you could call them. It was, I think, 50 or 70 people working on different search fields, and there were very, very different levels and very different kinds of search fields. So you can have everything from flying taxis or mini rental trains, like really, really out there ideas, but they worked on this. Mobility subscriptions and these newer modes of transportations. And some of them you can see that the search fields are overlapping, right? They're not always messy, but that's fine. And different units and different teams work on those different ideas. Now, the problem is in these ideas already here, how do you select? How do you choose and select a search field? Now, what we did here in the case is focused on the mobility app. So on the multi-mobility app, and Beat will talk you through a little bit more in detail how exactly we managed to end up on working on the multi-mobility app, because that's the first question. So all of these different things, but should we spend equal time on each of those? Where should we start?
So the first question which needs to be asked is really what we call it the business intention. Why do you want that? Why do you search in this field? And in this case here with this multi-mobility app, the reason was very compelling. You have to imagine that there is an app of this company, SBB, and this app is very popular in Switzerland. 3 million users, which is about almost 50% of the Swiss population uses this app on a regular basis. Switzerland is a very public transport country. There is a great public transport system. Everyone uses this app. And then there is a risk that these users move to the Google universe, basically move out of the universe of the company and move to the Google universe, because Google offers a great service to plan the trip. So when you plan the trip in Google, you know all this, you go on the map, you say, I want to go from Zurich to Wiesbaden and visit Frank. It gives me all the options which I can take, including Uber. So I can really combine different mobility transportation ways. It gives me the time it takes there. It gives me all the connection. It even gives me some price. And I cannot book, for example. But the moment I could book on the railway, the moment the users will switch to this Google universe and we use the users. So this was the business intention. Risk of disruption by the Google universe. Makes a lot of sense. This is clear. Now the company has developed a first prototype, an MVP, and had a list of literally 400 ideas, 400 implementation ideas, features that could be going into this app. And these ideas were not just sticky notes on the list, they were documented. There was really a roadmap of 400 ideas. A lot of work went into that. These ideas were structured, and these ideas were on the list and said, hey, what do we do now? Where do we start? Which idea do we have to implement? First, second, third. There was also an idea behind it. This multi-mobility app should be positioned as a connector of different means of transportation. So what you see on the right side. So you go on the train, then you arrive, then you take a bike, and then you take a trottinette, and then you go home. So it was the core idea was to connect. There were these 400 ideas, and this core idea, connect mean of transportation. And now we consider this still inside out, feature-driven, technology-driven, product-driven. This is what it is. And now we need to make a switch. And the switch is the customer perspective. And the customer perspective is jobs to be done. Forget everything about the solution. That's what job to be done says. Job to be done says people don't want a drill. They want a hole in the wall. People don't want a scooter. They want to go from A to B, irrespective of the solution. That's what they want. So we frame the business problem and the technology that they are developing purely from the customer perspective. In this case, was going from A to B. Then you can go higher up. Why do you want to go from A to B? You could meet someone, you can go to work, you can do leisure activities, etc. So this is the higher level of the job. Or you can go down lower, which is how do you do it? This becomes almost like a customer journey, but it is always solution neutral, solution agnostic. People have learned that you have to plan a trip. They have learned that. They choose the way to go there. They take the first transportation mode. They change, train, and then they arrive and they look around and find the place where they want to go. And during all this time, there's some disturbances, interruptions happening. Things go wrong. So this is basically what we call the job hierarchy, which is a tool that we have invented and apply to really quickly frame from the customer perspective. Then that's also me. We go into real user exploration. We deep dive into the user. We do sessions with users, and we draw out what we call metrics, job metrics. Metrics are criteria that users or customers use to decide if a job is done well or not. So how sure am I to catch the connecting train? Certainty to connect the train. time it takes to, walking on the train. Everyone of you has walked on a train and was late and arrived on the wrong platform because the platform has changed. All these metrics come out and we draw them out, literally 50 to 100 of these metrics easily for a job like going from A to B. These metrics are not yet needs, they're not yet pain points. They will soon become pain points, or some of them will become pain points. But these are expectations that customers expect when they try to get a job done. Very granular. And then it goes into quant.
So exactly. So you have to imagine, now that we understand the job to be done, that is solution independent, we have that list of metrics. So how do they measure actually how well they can get a job done or not? And this you can now give into a survey, a quantitative study, and ask actual real users, people that use that apps with different segments, different personas, however you want to call them, and have a representative sample in the market and ask them, well, how important, how relevant is that metric to you? How relevant is it to know whether you need to run or you can walk? How relevant is it for you to know if you have to go left or go right once you step out of the train when you arrive at the station? So you have to imagine a large list of those metrics. You can put them into a quant, and what you see in the middle is what we call the journey navigator. So following the journey, you will see for each of those metrics, let's call it 50 or so, how important is that one? And how well is it already solved with the solutions that they use? So what you can then see is, for example, there in the middle, there's a huge gap between that metric. I need to know, do I need to go left or do I need to go right once I step out of the train? So that is how we define a pain point. Something is really, really important in the market, but there is no satisfaction. There is no satisfier there. So there is no solution that would address that problem. So people struggle with it all the time. Now, the beauty of this is you can do two things. One, we showed that it is not about combining different modes of transport. That came out very clear. That, you can imagine, is quite a discussion to have, but that was what came out. And now you can actually figure out how to navigate that ocean of 400 ideas. Because what you can do is what we call a pain matching. You take the 400 feature ideas and you match them with the pain points that you have out from the study, and you will quickly see, and that can be done quite quickly, so that's half a day workshop, you see which ideas to prioritize and which not to prioritize. And maybe even white spots. So if you look at pain 2, there is no idea, even in the 400 features, there is no idea there. So there it's fine to ideate. There it's fine to create new ideas because you know there is a problem behind. Okay, once you have these top 10 ideas selected, filtered out, what we then do is create kind of what we call an initial North Star value proposition, right? So this is a kind of a paper prototype. Nothing is developed yet. Of course, these 400 ideas aren't developed either, but now you can really start to define a story. So what's the story behind the features and the whole app that you want to tell? It starts with the job, so the upper left, goes to the unmet needs. And the problem is, do I need to go left or right? And the promise of the app or the specific feature is you will always know where to go. So from your home to the destination, we make sure with the app that you use, you will always know where to go. Inside the train station, outside, whatever. And that's then the promise. So this kind of arranges the story that you can use to convince people internally and externally. Kind of a paper prototype, initial North Star. That's part of what a meaningful idea is. And so maybe,
maybe we have to add one point. I mean, the CEO of this company said, I don't want to give this task to the core business. I want to give this to the innovation lab. The purpose of the innovation lab is to develop a competitive business that can be scaled and that is almost competitive to their core app, which has these 3 million users. That was the intention. That was a purposeful decision. So it has to scale. It has to be something that scales. That was a scaling plan. But then what we have from this knowledge so far is we know exactly where the pain points are. We know it's about orientation and then not combining the means of travel. We know the detailed pain areas and the pain points, and we can put that in what we call the meaningful idea canvas. can create and start filling out this canvas. And we know already what are the pain areas. We know what is the solution idea, the innovation idea. We have some customer segments also in the analysis. We know some personas, if you want, that would respond differently to this pain point, to this solution. And we have a plan how we engage with the market in a test, in a launch it. But of course, to have a scale business, there are some more elements needed. And Frank will explain that to you now.
Exactly. So the customer perspective obviously is one crucial element in creating new sizable and profitable businesses, but there's more to it, right? So what could be an unfair advantage if you look at the box on the top, or if you look at middle row to the left one, is this a good problem that we are addressing? Can we build up a defendable position in here? What would be the major cost blocks? And if we look 3 years into the future and then the afternoon session, etc., what does the future tell us? Is that solution, that innovation that we are thinking about future-proof? So this is the meaningful idea canvas. And if you look at it, and those of you who work extensively with those standard canvases, the lean canvas, the business model canvas, you see that this is a kind of a precursor, right? We put the customers on the right. In the middle column, you find the unique value proposition. To the left, you find something that already starts to materialize at how do you want to solve it. At the bottom, you find the revenue and the cost block consideration. So what we're doing and along the journey is to say, well, in the first part of the journey, in the first 2 process steps, we'll provide you with a meaningful idea canvas that will then, during validation, become the lean canvas and the business model canvas. Think of it to make it easier in that. So now we do have a meaningful idea, right? An idea that addresses customer pains. We might have the idea that this is a defendable position because not Google from a mountain view will have a hard time crafting that micro navigation in Zurich main station, right? But obviously the Swiss railway system, SBB, could do that. And if we look at all the other factors, we would say, well, there's a meaningful idea, but how do we validate it? Most predominantly in the corporate context, so that it fits with the company. And how do we build what needs to be built, the MVP, together with the customer, the minimum marketable product, the subsequent product functions, etc. How does this work? And then how do we make a scaled business out of it? And this is the focus of this part of the presentation. Well, working with companies that work on the business building problem now for 5 years gives me some sort of insight, nailing down where do companies struggle most. Right? That's the issue. And if you think back at the very start of this presentation, there's this valley of death after the MVP, where 7 out of 8 corporate startups die. And in this slide, I try to summarize the main defaults in the process after you find a idea that you say, well, let's take it through the validation cycle and let's scale it up. Keep in mind, this session is about the process only. There's a leadership envelope around that, and that's also how the people from the core organization and the innovator should be working together. That's all part of that business building infrastructure that is currently being co-created. We're looking at the process only, and I see 6 items. So where do innovators focus on? And you see in many companies, they focus on the product, right? They think about minimum viable product. They speak about the pilot product, the minimum marketable product. There's too much value put on a framework that tells the companies how to create a business on it. And most predominantly, how to create a business that plays together with the existing business. Weak progress monitoring. Yes, the innovators all have their canvases and they have their innovation jargon and they say, well, we have found problem solution fit, right? But where do they really stand on the journey, in particular when it comes to the corporate environment that they're working in? And if you think about portfolio management, where you need to compare apples with oranges, right? Where do you really stand? So that's another missing piece. The next layer is thinking about that one company, right? It's not innovation versus the day-to-day business. It's about the core business that pays the salaries of today, that funds the innovation journey, and the innovators trying to create a sustainable, future, sizable, profitable business model. So this is the one company thing that we're talking about. And the two biggest mishaps is there is no deliberate aligning between today's core and the intention that you're trying to scale up. And the whole corporate context is undervalued, right? Coming from the lean startup thinking, where even Stephen Blank and Eric Ries say the lean startup was never designed for a corporate context. Well, that's why we have the lean scale up in here. And when it comes to delivering the promise, you see that there are teams at work, right? But these are not really connected to core. They are somewhere in outer space, trying to find an organizational home, try to fight an uphill battle against the corporate antibodies that materialize whenever someone tries to disturb that performance engine. And typically, the teams have too little freedom to move at pace and at speed, and also to beat the external VC-funded startups that you find out there. So how do we address this? And let me just show you then in a kind of an overview and how the whole lean scale-up framework addresses these shortcomings. So number one is you have to establish a quite comprehensive validation scheme. On the x-axis of that, what I call the 4x4 matrix, you see the content of the validation, right? The customer, the value, the size of the price, the product, the IP situation. Then in the third column, you see the corporate context, the business model and the financials. And the fourth dimension would be capabilities in organization, the capabilities to validate and also to build. There's an interesting point in here in the third column that the business model is tied to the corporate context and not to the customer and value kind of thinking that the lean startup and the design thinking propagate. Case in point, I was working with a medtech company, and they wanted to move from selling MRT scanners to diagnosis as a service, right, with monthly subscription, right? They have AI that looks at MRT scanners and say, this is the therapy that patient needs, and we invoice you with X euros 50 on that statement, right? But they found out that corporate is not suited, not set up for processing monthly recurring revenues, right? And every single startup that they launched ran into that brick wall. So you need to put that business model closer to the core. That's the learning in here. If you go up north, you find 4 maturity stages. And obviously, we only have limited time to look into that. But these maturity stages address on a holistic perspective, including the product, but also the customer and the corporate context. First, the question, is this worthy to be scaled? So should we really scale it? What you do is what I call, you make experiments with the market. And once you convinced yourself that it's worthy to be scaled, then you ask the question, are we already ready to be scaled? That means you make experiments in market. If you have a scalable go-to-market approach, if your tech stack scales, etc. And then in the last step, you arrange a alignment between the core organization and the scale up. And how do we address the progress monitoring where a particular scale-up stands? Well, you build up a scorecard. Every single segment of that 4x4 matrix has deliverables. And with the deliverables come thinking tools you need to use to provide the data points and the proof points that you actually have the traffic light in green in here. So this scorecard also enables you to detail and nail down the leaps of faith. This scorecard enables you to run a portfolio management, and you can even, as some of our clients did, put it in a toolbox, right? So where you collect the best practices and the examples, and where you establish a common language between the day-to-day business and the new business, the innovation. But a fool with a tool is still a fool, so they say. So what you need is a kind of management process wrapped around that. So the way the lean scale-up operates, it breaks down all those deliverables in steps that the teams need to take. And these steps go into sprints. And then you have a kind of auditing, soft coaching, mentoring, whatever you'd like it, call it role outside of the teams that says, okay, I look at your progress, the data that you produce convinces me, I make that traffic light green, right? And this scorecard then is being aligned with the senior management sponsor of that particular venture. So let's finally look at the scaling up stage. In that transition to scaling up, obviously there are detailed checklists available, what needs to be done. But the four major headlines is you need to look at the assumptions that you have. Are they really scalable? It's not about killing that scale up here. It's about identifying the debt that you carry over to the scaling up phase. You design the interplay between the day-to-day business and the scale up, as I said earlier, getting into those PM systems, the portfolio management, the process management, etc., is key on that. You align on a common game plan and the right metrics, and you define that kind of startup peer autonomy that the scaling up team could operate in the corporate context. The scaling up itself has 4 tracks. All of these 4 tracks have the tools that you need to win in those 4 tracks. So just taking out one example that you see in the market track, when we started to co-create the lean scale-up, all those 20 companies provided some of their past success, past stories when they tried to build new businesses. So we worked out of a stack of, say, 60 or 80 or so corporate scale-ups. Out of them, some became businesses, but obviously the big majority failed. We found that the ones who won, who became a big business, all followed a validated go-to-market and growth route, right? So they did not just jump on the occasion to win a big ticket client. They had a clearly validated plan on how to move from segment to segment as they built the product. And this is the one part of the market. You also need to scale in product and tech. You need to scale in the organization. And certainly last, but certainly not least, in the capabilities and the relationship to core. And then what you do is you cut across these 4 tracks and you define milestones, clearly measurable milestones that trigger metered funding. So these are the 4 stages, Beat. And if you want to summarize, what are the key success recipes?
Yeah. We have shown you the 4 key steps of this end-to-end process, a process that is currently broken, not efficient, not leading to the results that innovation should bring. The first step is really the search field, that this is correctly filtered, clearly defined, that the business intention behind is very clear, what it should achieve. Then the second step is this switch to the customer side. Forget about the solutions, really think about the opportunities from a need perspective, measure the pain points to focus the many ideas that very often fly around. The third step is then really think already then about the scale, the transferring and the scaling into the organization, measure the progress. You've seen the scorecard, which we think is a fantastic tool. It also speaks to the core business. Frank talks about the blue shirts and the red shirts. This is a picture from Blue Ocean and Red Ocean. We love this. I mean, the core, these are blue shirts, and no, these are red shirts, and the other ones are the blue shirts. They speak different languages, and it has to be taught, it has to be used to business language. And then there is really the transition and the ambition to make it big, and have a clear go-to-market plan so that it flies.